If no agreement is reached between SAWS and the developer within 120 days, the developer can proceed to TCEQ for them to consider creating a district. If, however, an agreement is reached between SAWS and the developer to provide wastewater services, the developer can proceed with development. It should be noted that it would not prevent them from submitting a petition for a special district for funding the improvements to be made in the district. Since the petition was brought forward, several concerns have been raised regarding the project, notably the on-site wastewater treatment plant, its location over the contributing zone of the Edwards Aquifer, and conservation issues. To date, the following actions have occurred. SAWS approved the utility service agreement for water with conditions related to sewer in February 2022. The master development plan was approved by both Bexar County and the City of San Antonio in February 2023 and March 2023, respectively. The wastewater permit was approved by TCEQ in October 2025. Consideration request in October and November of 2025. In accordance with Section 212.172 of the Texas Local Government Code, the city negotiates a development agreement with all special district requests for consent to creation. The development agreement serves as a contractual agreement between the city and the current as well as future owners of the property. The development agreement is filed with the county and runs with the land. The proposed Bexar County MUD No. 2 development agreement is being negotiated with the developer at this time and includes proposed terms noted on this slide. The development agreement will, 1, incorporate development controls that I'll go into more detail in the next 2 slides. 2, have the developer agreeing to a third-party conservation easement holder in accordance with the requirements of Chapter 183 of the Texas Natural Resources Code. Note, owners agreeing to provide increased road network access points for the single-family residences within the district property, which are located within fire and flood areas. Include language pertaining to the district's debt, including a cap on the district's bond issuance of $150 million, the timing on when the last bonds can be issued, and the ability for the city to charge customers within the district a post-annexation surcharge as permitted by the Texas Water Code to compensate for its assumption of obligations of the district if the city were to choose to annex at a future date. Also allow for SAWS to review all plans for construction and as-built documents containing the seal of a professional engineer, as well as plans for operation of the wastewater treatment plant prior to initiation of the plant's operations, and also allow SAWS access to the reuse system at all times for inspection and testing. Also note subdivision regulations which apply in the ETJ that the developer would comply with. Examples include the tree ordinance, the water quality protection ordinance, irrigation permitting, street connectivity, and signs. It also include that the current and future owners agree to voluntary annexation if a future city council chooses to annex the district at the end of the term of the development agreement, and it would require that the owners provide annual updates to the city on the progress of the development, and finally, pay the city an operations assessment fee of $175 per built residential unit for a total of $525,000. The wastewater service development controls shown here and on the next slide are some of those included in the settlement agreement between the city and municipal operations related to discharge of treated domestic effluent from a wastewater treatment plant, as well as the sewer-related provisions SAWS negotiated with the developer into the USA for SAWS to provide water to the development. Some of the development controls include the plant being operated and maintained by an A-level operator, setting aside 50% of the project as open space, 30% impervious cover restriction, the discharge permit only serving the development, soil supplementation to allow for adequate soil absorption, complying with SAWS's backflow prevention requirement, monitoring of the wastewater treatment plant, on-site personnel for adequate notification purposes, and design and construction of wet wells to contain peak design flow. In summary, City Council is to consider the request for a consent to the creation of a municipal utility district on February 5th. As mentioned, the item will also include approval of a development agreement as a condition of the city's consent. The development agreement is in the final stages of negotiation with the developer and would contain the proposed terms previously mentioned on slide 8. City Council has three options. The council can choose to 1, approve consent to the creation of the MUD with the executed development agreement, 2, deny consenting to the creation of the MUD, or 3, take no action. As the development agreement is a condition of the city's consent, it would only be entered into when City Council considers the request on February 5th. It may not be entered into later if City Council were to choose to deny and if TCQ were to approve creating a municipal utility district. Mayor, this concludes my briefing on the Guajolote Ranch District. Staff available for questions.
Thank you for that presentation, Bridget. A couple of clarifying questions on slide. When you talk about slide 7, some of the concerns raised, I know some have pointed to SWERI analysis that has spoken to some of the concerns. My understanding is that we've reached out to SWERI for them to bring counter what SAWS has provided, and they have not returned anything to us. So at this point, we are utilizing SAWS's analysis.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure everybody was on the same page when it comes to that. Would you also please clarify so everybody's on the same page regarding the status of this with the county?
The status with the county?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, so because the development is in the ETJ, it requires that the county and city review the MDP. So they did review the MDP and they approved it in March of 2023, and then the city approved it in March. They approved it in February of 2020, approved it in March of 2023.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll move on to public comment. We have several individuals that have signed up to speak. I will call folks up in the order that they signed up. Everybody will have 3 minutes to speak. All individuals will, and groups of 3, will have a total of 9 minutes. The first individual is Sophia Rios. And because there are so many folks that are here to speak, I would ask, I'm going to call the person who's going to speak and then the person who's right after them. And if that person would line up right behind the speaker so we can go through it pretty quickly, okay? So Sophia Rios, please, followed by Justice Adrastea. Okay. Sophia Rios. Okay. Justice Adrastea. Mesha White. Cheryl Laurie. Damian Romero. Okay. Damian Romero. Olivia Vowell. Peter Bea or Bella. Okay. Two. Okay. Jane Sams, if you'd come up then, please. You have a total of 6 minutes. And Jane Sams, is there a group of 3 that you intended? Okay. All right. So, Peter, who are you giving Peter, you're giving your time to Jane Sams? Okay, so then Jane Sams, you'll come up, please. Okay. What is that? Okay, so Susan Bevins, Pete Bella, and Jane Sams. Okay, you have 9 minutes, ma'am.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Mayor, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Kate Hall Feist. I live in the city of Gray Forest, and I'm speaking as a member of the Scenic Loop Helotes Creek Alliance. I'm here this morning to urge you to vote against the municipal utility district proposed by Lennar Homes. And it comes down to one overriding issue: water. Beneath San Antonio flows the Edwards Aquifer, a vital life source for our city, clear, clean, and naturally filtered. Its waters have sustained generations, nourished our landscapes, and supported our communities. It is the largest single-source drinking water for San Antonio and also one of the most vulnerable. The Edwards Karst Aquifer water flows rapidly through fractures, faults, caves, and conduits with very limited natural filtration. Contamination introduced at the surface can reach the aquifer quickly and unpredictably. Once compromised, this resource cannot simply be fixed or replaced. The Edwards Aquifer is a cornerstone of life and well-being for all who call San Antonio home. That life source is now at risk. The decision you make in the coming weeks will determine whether the Edwards Aquifer remains pure and abundant for future generations, or whether we accept preventable harm. It is a clear choice: protect our pristine water or allow it to be put in jeopardy. Your constituents understand what's at stake. More than 1,500 residents formally opposed this project at TCEQ, with 400 appearing in person to speak out against it. Just days ago, over 150 residents opposed the mud before the Planning Commission. In every hearing in the past 3 years, not a single person has stood up in favor of development. Today, you'll hear about many factors that aid. You'll hear about financial, regulatory risks related to a mud. You'll hear concerns about failed wastewater plants and about the safety implications of placing a high-density development in this ultra-sensitive location. But you'll also hear something else. You'll hear from people offering a brighter, more responsible solution, one that protects our life source and aligns with San Antonio's own plan for the North Sector. A solution that prioritizes long-term stewardship over short-term convenience. Good planning is not measured in months or fiscal quarters. It is measured in decades, in the health of our water, the safety of our communities, and the future we leave behind. The choice for you today is not just about development. It's about the responsibility and a decision about whether San Antonio knowingly introduces avoidable risk to its drinking water supply. I'd like to close with a quote from Councilman Munguia. As the City Council appointee to the Planning Commission, I personally led the charge by making the motion to deny the developer's mud request for the Guajolote Ranch project. I am proud to report that this motion succeeded, and we are officially recommending denial to the City Council. The risks to our aquifer and the long-term safety of Bexar County are simply too high to ignore.
Ma'am, thank you. You can submit the rest of your comments for the record.
Oh, I had 3 extra minutes.
Your name, ma'am? Okay, so Susan, so you had 6 total.
Yeah,
She's on 23.
One last line.
Aurora, she's number 23. Okay, thank you.
Thank you to everyone who showed up to advocate for our community. My stand stands firm. I will be voting no on this measure at City Council next Thursday. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so now this is the Peter Bella, Jane Sams group. Is that right? Okay.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
okay,
Ma'am, you have 6 minutes.
great, thank you. Good morning, Mayor and the City Council. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Jane Sams, and I live at 21035 Sams Ranch Road on Scenic Loop, and on the land that has, I live on the land that was my late husband's for over 140 years, which was very precious to him. And it's right next door to the Guajolote Ranch. As we know, a MUD is a scheme by developers to issue bonds to build infrastructure, including wastewater treatment plants, and impose taxes on their own residents to pay it back. Recent reports in the Houston Chronicle, published also by the San Antonio Express News, have documented how MUDs have been promoted statewide by developers as boosting affordable housing, but rather have resulted in the opposite, while also straining the local governments. Among the findings are as follows. New home buyers frequently have been hit with high property taxes that are double or triple of those of the county or neighboring cities, plus monthly fees for basic services from trash pickup to police protection, shattering the illusion of affordable housing. Many home buyers are lured by attractive price lists that haven't been able to stay because of the high taxes and the fees, calling into question the sustainability of the developments. MUDs have resulted in higher taxes for residents outside the developments, even as cities and counties have been held on the hook to protect the services or provide the services for even to maintain the infrastructures of MUD. Those costs often cannot be fully recouped, falling on all existing taxpayers and property owners, such as all of us in this room and outside, to expand our roads, our police staff, and to provide other services. Moreover, MUDs often function like invisible or permanent local governments, but without the same level and service and upkeep, and without the same accountability, and our local government, would lose total control, would have none. Essentially, with deep pockets can just come in, walk away, leaving unsuspecting and local governments holding the bag. I personally have knowledge of this because of my sister, Paulette Reynolds, who lives in a MUD near Katy and close on the outside of Houston. And she pays nearly $3,000 a year in MUD taxes and fees, in addition to her regular property taxes. She has lived in her home since 2012 and is a widow, and is essentially, then this adds essentially another $40,000 to her original price of her own. That's $40,000 that she's having to pay that she didn't count on having to pay. And it grows each year. She also sent me an article from a neighbor on Next Door Neighbor that says, quote, "Hi neighbors, this is our first year in Texas. We are at total shock of our MUD tax. It's like half of the dang mortgage. Anyone else has this shock or know how we can get it reduced? It's dang near almost or more than our property tax." How do we say this to all the people that are moving into Texas, into MUDs, that are not aware of this happening to them, just like my sister Paulette's neighbor? I think it's a shame that we do that. This clearly would not be providing affordable housing with the number 2 MUD in our county, or for San Antonio. I respectfully ask you to deny have given, and I thank you again for listening to me, and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Jim Birbiglia. Followed by Diana Duncan.
Good morning. I'm Chaplain Colonel Jim Birbiglia, 24 years in the Army, and I'm here today because I'm a member of the MUD Board number 1. Have you ever wondered why there's no board number 2? Because it's such a terrible idea. It takes $150 million and borrows it at whatever interest, and then we have to pay it off, the people who moved in. I have now been paying $1,500 a month, $1,500 a year for 39 years. Nobody told me I was going to do this. Nobody said, here's what you have to pay. Somewhere in the papers, maybe it was, but I didn't see it. My friends didn't see it. Nobody in San Antonio Ranch saw it. But 39 years later, we're still paying. And the developer is living comfortably in Austin. He never paid a dime of it. He borrowed the money, just to give you an idea of how corrupt this mud board can be. When he set up the payment, it was 9%, and it was, you cannot pay it back. And so we wait until 2027 to pay it back. And then it's nearly impossible to get rid of the mud if you look at Texas law. You see, this is an autonomous body of 5 people appointed at first by the developer, later on elected, but it's autonomous. It does not have anything to do with the people in the housing area. It answers only to Texas law. And so things like this can happen. A group can get together and vote themselves $400 a meeting each, and nobody can do anything about it. Second, they can hire a lawyer because he's a buddy of the president, $700 an hour. We do the same thing under our reform government for $150. They hired a very nice secretary who worked about 3 hours a week, and she was paid $39,000 plus change a year. We do the same thing for less than $16,000.
Sir, if you have additional remarks, you can submit them for the record. Sir, if you have additional remarks past your time, you can submit them for the record. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Diana Duncan, followed by Lauren Hernandez. Okay. Lauren is giving Diana her time. The next person after this then will be Stuart Birnbaum.
Can I put this on the... So we'll have 3 minutes or 6 minutes? Thank you very much. Okay, and then if you want to pass this around, is that allowed? If you all want to touch this, you can have it. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for your time and your service. My name is Diana Duncan, and I live in San Antonio out in Bexar County. I'm originally from New York, but now, even when I was living in New York, the Edwards Aquifer was known to me. Somehow, it's in my consciousness. It's not just a local feature, but it has a national reputation, respected as one of the most important and sensitive groundwater systems in the country. I'm here today to speak in opposition to the proposed MUD number 2 for Guajolote and explain why approving it would place public health and our water supply at risk. At the heart of the issue, as Jim mentioned, is governance. If this MUD is approved, the city of San Antonio would have no oversight or enforcement authority over the wastewater treatment plant or water quality. That would mean no elected officials directly accountable to the public, no meaningful transparency, and no effective mechanism to enforce safety standards. If there is a leak, a system failure, or ongoing compliance, it is the public and not the developer that bears the consequences. San Antonio has shown remarkable foresight in protecting its groundwater. Since 2000, the city has invested nearly $50 million to purchase land in and around the Guajolote Ranch to safeguard the aquifer. Approving this MUD would undermine that investment and erase decades of careful planning and tax-funded payer protection. Last October, the TCEQ issued a permit allowing a wastewater treatment plant to discharge and spray treated effluent over land located in this sensitive environment. And it is not just the Edwards Aquifer contributing zone, it is also the Trinity Glen Rose recharge zone. So remember that. It is not just a contributing zone, it is a recharge zone. These areas are mapped this way for a reason. 1 million gallons daily of wastewater, or anything applied to this land, will move directly through the soil and effectively recharge the aquifer. Now, I brought a piece of the Helotes Creek with me, and you all are looking at it, and you can see the holes in it. That is what the ground is in Helotes Creek. That is where they're going to pour the wastewater. So can you imagine? Many people don't realize this, but karst geology is described as Swiss cheese, like that rock. Water moves rapidly through the fractures and underground conduits with little to no natural filtration. A failure would threaten private wells and the drinking water supply of more than 2.5 million of us. The risks here are real and they're documented. It's not a hypothetical if, it's a when. Of the 16 wastewater treatment plants located over the Edwards Aquifer contributing zone, only 4 meet drinking water standards, and of those 4, 3 have been out of compliance within the last 3 years. 1 was fined for serious violations. The type of wastewater plant proposed is a bioreactor. And while the water may look clean, it is not to type 1 human contact standards. And in practical terms, that means the permit allows treated sewage to be used to recharge our aquifer. We cannot until sick. Moving forward with this plan could risk putting the 7th largest city in our nation on a boil water notice. For all these reasons, lack of governance, public health risk, and the city's prior investments in the long-term protection of our water supply, I respectfully urge you to recommend denial of MUD 2 to this. Thank you for your time and consideration. Thank you.
Stuart Birnbaum and Nettie Birnbaum, are you together?
Birnbaum, I'm giving my time to Stuart.
Okay, 6 minutes, sir, thanks.
Thank you. I'd like to thank the mayor and council for addressing this very important issue, not just for San Antonio, but for the surrounding area that relies upon the Trinity Aquifer. My name is Stuart Birnbaum. I live in Helotes. I'm asking you to reject the MUD application to develop the Guajolote Ranch. I have a doctoral degree in geology. I am an emeritus associate professor in the Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences at UT San Antonio. I am also on the board of the Trinity Glen Rose Groundwater Conservation District, in whose jurisdiction the Guajolote Ranch lies. Now, I'm not saying this to toot my horn. I just want to develop some level of expertise for what follows. I also have to say that my comments are mine alone. They do not represent the Trinity Glen Rose Groundwater Conservation District, nor do they represent UT San Antonio. But as a professor, there will be a quiz. So I hope you're taking notes. So during my research career at UTSA, I studied limestone, karst, water chemistry. I'm very familiar with the fragility of karst aquifers and am extremely concerned about the impact of Lennars Homes' proposed project on the Helotes Creek watershed, specifically the inevitable contamination of first the Trinity Glen Rose aquifer, followed by contamination of the Edwards aquifer, in which the Trinity is a major contributor in this watershed. I'd like to speak as an expert in the science being ignored by all involved with the project, specifically publications by the United States Geological Survey, the Edwards Aquifer Alliance, and recently the Southwest Research Institute. The overwhelming evidence is that the Trinity Glen Rose aquifer is in hydrologic communication with the Edwards aquifer and contributes a significant volume of water to the recharge of the Edwards. The city of San Antonio has an obligation to protect the water resources of over 1.5 million San Antonians, as well as the water of the city's neighbors who rely on the Trinity Glen Rose aquifer. Claims by SAW's CEO Puente to the contrary, the Trinity Glen Rose does, in fact, recharge the Edwards in the subsurface. Mr. Puente invokes the presence of the informally named Camp Bullis hydrological unit that acts, in his words, as a barrier to contamination from the Glen Rose into the Edwards. Research does indeed find that the Camp Bullis layer is of low permeability and throughout many portions of its extent. However, when rocks are involved in faulting, as we have here in the Balcones fault zone, the rocks are subjected to cracking, fracturing, and become excellent conduits of groundwater flow. Quoting from SAW's website, the Edwards Aquifer is an intensely faulted and fractured carbonate limestone formation that lies within the Balcones fault zone. The storage capacity, flow characteristics, water-producing capabilities, and efficient recharging ability make this geological anomaly one of the most wondrous aquifers in the world. The Trinity Aquifer is likewise involved in the Balcones fault zone, and it is a fault contact with the Edwards, and is also fractured, thus providing communication between the aquifers. To quote a description from a U.S. Geological Survey publication, those faults with sufficiently large displacement may juxtapose the Edwards and Trinity aquifer bearing units and provide from the upper or lower Trinity into the Edwards. Overlying the Camp Bullis member, cavernous hydrostrata, and the same USGS publication, as, quote, an abundance of caves is indicative of generally well-developed fracture, channel, and cavern porosity. Porosity of the cavernous member is primarily associated with fractures and caves, and thus is interconnected and more permeable relative to that of the underlying Camp Bullis member. So, even if the Camp Bullis member is impermeable, when that wastewater is introduced on the surface, it's going to sink into the cavernous member, which is very permeable. And when it reaches the Camp Bullis member, it's not just going to stop. It's going to flow laterally until it reaches a permeable fracture, or as pressure builds up, it will rise to the surface to spring flow, and that will contribute to the base flow of the streams in this area. So I'd like to quote again from the U.S. Geological Survey, the Trinity Aquifer also provides recharge to the Edwards Aquifer by supplying base flow to several streams in the catchment area that flow south and down gradient over the Edwards Aquifer recharge zone. Recharge may also occur through lateral subsurface migration of groundwater into stratigraphically younger Edwards rocks that are faulted against the Trinity group. Since I'm out of time, I'd like to say that asking you to do the right thing and deny the mud application. Thank you.
Steve Lee, followed by Anissa Munson.
Give me his time.
Hi, I'm Neil Hernandez. I own the largest cave system in Bexar County, which is downstream from the sewer plant. I donate my time.
John Hernandez?
John Neal.
What is Emilio?
John Neal Hernandez.
John, okay, so number 35, got it.
Okay. And I have a handout that needs to be displayed here.
So you have 6 minutes. He has a handout.
Not a handout, but one that needs to be displayed. No, just display.
Anissa Munson, you'll be next.
Okay, good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. My name is Steve Lee, and my family lives outside of Gray Forest. on land that's been in my family for more than 160 years. And we get our water from a well in the Trinity Glenrose Aquifer. We got involved in this issue because Lennar's development at Guajolote Ranch would release an average of 1 million gallons a day of treated sewage into the Helotes Creek watershed, which directly recharges the Trinity Glenrose Aquifer. That watershed also contributes up to 15% of the total recharge of the Edwards Aquifer, the principal water source for about 2.5 million people across this region. At Friday's Planning Commission meeting, a Lennar representative showed a map, which you see here, of other existing wastewater treatment plants in the contributing zone of the Edwards Aquifer where Guajolote Ranch is located. David Grove, Lennar's regional president for Texas, said on Texas Public Radio that those plants are operating, quote, safely and effectively, unquote. Well, that might not be their best talking point, because half of the 14 wastewater treatment plants in the contributing zone that have reported data violated discharge limits of dangerous pollutants during the past 3 years, and 2 have been fined, according to U.S. Environmental Protection Agency reports. The non-compliant findings included pollutants such as E. coli, ammonia, nitrogen, phosphorus, and total suspended solids. And while Lennar maintains that the Guajolote Ranch plant would be advanced, 3 of the 4 most advanced plants currently operating in the area contributing zone that treat for drinking water status have been out of compliance during the past 3 years, according to the EPA data. Notably, the only mud with a wastewater treatment plant in the contributing zone currently, the Meyer Ranch mud in Comal County, was cited for discharges exceeding permitted limits for nitrates and phosphorus for 2 quarters in the last 3 years, the data shows. High nitrates are linked to blue baby syndrome in infants, causing brain damage or death, while high phosphorus produces algae blooms with toxins harming aquatic life and causing gastrointestinal illness and liver damage in humans. We could provide you with those EPA reports if you'd like. Also, Lennar's plant would not be able to fully treat for persistent and dangerous compound PFAS, forever chemicals, as well as heavy metals and poliovirus, all serious pollutants that, according to the U.S. Geological Survey and the EPA, are present in effluent and nearly impossible to remove once they enter the aquifer's highly porous karst system. Finally, and also at the Friday meeting, another Lennar rep was asked about his company's own compliance record, and he replied that he didn't have a good answer. And he was right. He didn't have a good answer, because in 2019, Lennar violated significant provisions of a negotiated settlement agreement, as well as TCEQ issued permits to meet Clean Water Act requirements for its 4S ranch development in Bulverde. And by then, it was too late to secure permanent protection of recharge provided. In light of all of this, should Lennar be trusted now? I respectfully ask you this opportunity today.
Anissa Munn, followed by Austin Browning.
Good morning. I'll be donating my time to Lynette Munson.
Okay. Number 32. Austin Browning, you're next.
I should be Lynette Munson.
I was saying Austin is after you, ma'am.
Oh.
You have 6 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is Lynette Munson, and I represent on behalf of the Scenic Loop Helotes Creek community. Our community submitted a public records request. I apologize. Our community submitted a public records request on November the 24th, 2025, request R0240901122425, seeking all documents related to the Fire Marshal's review of the Guajolote Ranch Master Development Plan. We asked for 3 very specific categories of records. Any recommendations or required modifications the Fire Marshal made to the preliminary MDP, whether those recommendations were included in the final plan, all documentation showing review or approval of the developer's proposal to use a single ingress and egress for the development of roughly 3,000 units, despite the Unified Development Code requirement of 2 access points, and any documentations related to a roadway classification, including the claim that Scenic Loop Road is an arterial roadway, and there are no projects that are funded to upgrade it. The Fire Marshal's response was simple and alarming, as you can see. We have no record response for your request. The Bexar County Fire Marshal's office has had no contact with the developer of this property. Let me repeat. That's a 3,000 development unit. One of the largest proposed in this area has had no contact whatsoever with the Bexar County Fire Marshal. No review, no recommendations, no safety analysis, no approval for a single ingress point. The county, the emergency responders are being asked to accept a massive development without any fire safety oversight at all. This is not a paperwork issue. This is a life safety issue. Seriously, not only is it potential injury to community members, my family has a long-standing history of first responders. My family was one of the founding members of the Milan Volunteer Fire Departments. My grandfather served on the fire department for over 30 years. My great-uncle was a chief on the fire department, and now my daughter is a San Antonio Fire Department paramedic. So when we talk about asking our first responders to accept additional risk in what they already have, that hits very close to home for me. A single access point for 3,000 homes is not a minor deviation. It is a catastrophic risk in the event of wildfire, structure fire, medical emergencies, roadway blockage. Scenic Loop is already overburdened, and it is not an arterial roadway. There is no funded plans to make it one. Yet the developer is moving forward as these facts simply don't matter. If the fire marshal has not reviewed this project, then the public has not been protected. If the fire marshal has not approved a single access point, then the project does not meet the UDC. And if the fire has not been contacted, then the MDP is incomplete and should not be allowed to advance. We are asking this body to insist on what deserves development that is safe, that is lawful, and is grounded in real emergency response standards, not assumptions, not shortcuts, and not silence. I ask that you do the right thing and vote no for this. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Austin Browning, followed by Judy Hall.
Good morning, all. I would like to donate my 3 minutes to my good friend, Austin Browning.
Judy Hall. So 6 minutes total. Thank you.
Impacted by the Guajolote Ranch project. I'm here to share two serious concerns that affect the public. First, the people of San Antonio and Bexar County should not be responsible for the financial risk of a $150 million mud. This project is allowed only because of a special exception limited to 1,000 homes. Nearby landowners have confirmed there will be no additional access or exit allowed, meaning the project cannot grow beyond this size. The risk should stay with the developer, not the taxpayers. First slide, please. On this slide, the developer document incorrectly labeled Scenic Loop Road as a secondary arterial road. That's because the city does not allow a project this large to be built more than 1 mile from a true arterial road, like 1604 or Alamo Area MPO. Scenic Loop Road is actually a collector road and not an arterial roadway. Next slide, please. On this slide, you see the traffic study was not protect the public. It mainly benefit the developer. Next slide. The developer is only improving a small section of the intersection of Babcock, and which is a couple of feet east and west or north and south. The rest of that expense will be borne by the San Antonio and the Bexar County residents. That cost could escalate to over $200 million way. There are no schools, there's no grocery stores or services within 5 miles of this development. This means residents will have to drive to Dare or Loop 1604 or to I-10. The next slide, please. As a result, the traffic will increase approximately 5,000 trips per day to over 30,000 trips per day on a small 2-lane rural road shown in the slide, gone by this time. Please consider the greater good for our community and recommend that the City Council deny this mud. The developer should pay for their own costs. No on mud 2. I thank you for your time and appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
Michael Schick, followed by Ken Kempf.
Madam Mayor, Mr. Kemp and I are in the same neighborhood. We'll be addressing the same issues, a tag team. Permission to speak, collective 6 minutes.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Phillips, you'll be next.
Good morning. My name is Mike. Michael William Schick. I'm here today to raise serious concerns about the hardship variance granted to the Guajolote Ranch subdivision in November 2022. This variance was approved based on representations made by Lennar's engineering in a letter to Development Services Office. In that letter, Pape Dawson claimed that permanent emergency access would be provided at 3 points along the northern boundary of the proposed subdivision as well as to the south and the west. Sadly, that claim is disturbingly false. The neighborhood to the north of Guajolote Ranch is a private gated community called the Canyons at Scenic Loop. My backyard abuts the east side of the Guajolote Ranch. I find it astonishing that no one from Lennar or Pape Dawson has ever contacted the Canyons to request or confirm access, emergency or otherwise. In fact, as you'll soon hear from Mr. Kemp, our board president, the Canyons is perfectly clear. We are a private gated subdivision, and Guajolote Ranch will not be gated. Granting access would effectively convert the Canyons into an open access community, which homeowners additionally West publicly stated their strong refusal to grant access through their land. Texas law is clear. Unless an easement is granted or streets are publicly dedicated, the presumption to claim that any kind of access will be provided as if this is a fait accompli is not only speculative, it is misleading at best and perjurious. at worst. Matter if this had been approved by an engineering associate without professional, this raises serious questions about the procedural integrity and legal validity of the approval itself. In those facts, I respectfully urge the council to re-examine the basis of the hardship variance, require documented proof that's written of granted emergency access, given any further approvals, investigate whether misleading representations were knowingly made to officials in the future are reviewed and signed by licensed professionals with appropriate authority. Finally, I was on holiday in Maui last month, staying a couple of miles from Lahaina. 2 years ago, more than 100 people died in that Lahaina fire, including many who died trapped in their cars because of clogged roads. Council members, the only existing and permanent ingress and egress to the landlocked Guajolote Ranch is a narrow choke point, which you see circled there in pink. This is the checkpoint. This is the only ingress and egress onto the two-lane scenic loop road. Why any developer would put the lives of thousands of men and women and children at risk is uncomprehendable. Please deny the MUD. It's not just a matter of technical compliance. It is a matter of public trust, legal integrity, and community safety. Please vote no on MUD. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Ken Kempf. I reside in the Canyons at Scenic Loop, which is a property owners association and functions as such. We are private, owned by
Ladies and gentlemen, we've had loss of life. Please note that this was not a low water crossing. You can see there, this is northbound Scenic Loop Road approaching Menchaca. That is a raised bridge over Helotes Creek. Approving this project means doubling the chance of another tragedy, putting my constituents at increased risk. Thank you for saying no to this.
Lisa Pack, followed by Philip Manna.
Good morning, Councilman and Mayor. My name is Lisa Murray's Pack. I live at 15760 Scenic Loop Road, and I'm the secretary of the Helotes Creek, Scenic Loop Helotes Creek Alliance. Public money raised through sales tax revenue was used by the Edwards Aquifer Protection Program to purchase more than $50 million of Helotes in the Helotes Creek watershed alone. This area was deemed environmental in the 2010 North Sector Plan. I have private property along that, which includes almost a half a mile of Helotes Creek. So I am and I have an easement. I'm personally invested in this fight. Dr. Francine Romero, head of the EAPP program, has concluded that the program has been adapted to the city's need to protect the recharge and contributing zones beyond the regulatory authority that they have. Why would the city and city council jeopardize all of this investment by helping a developer to build a high-density residence neighborhood in this area? The Guajolote Ranch property, with its karst geology, faults, fractures, and lack of soil, provides a direct conduit to the Trinity Glen Rose Aquifer and then the Edwards Aquifer. In a 1996 Pape Dawson engineering report, who is Lennar's Engineers, it stated that this was environmentally sensitive and shouldn't be built on. Why did they change their mind? The proposed 1 million a day of the treated sewage jeopardizes all this. Regardless of how they disperse it, most especially San Antonio's drinking water. As one of the last large undeveloped properties in the Helotes Creek watershed, an EAPP conservation easement would protect and preserve the 1,970 acres, 97 acres in perpetuity. Why not pursue that? At the very least, I request that you deny the proposed MUD. Thank you.
Philip Manna, Kathy Manna, you're together? Okay. And then Randy Newman, you'll follow.
I'm Kathy Manna. I'd like to allocate my time to Philip Manna.
Thank you. You have 6 minutes, sir. Randy Newman, you're next.
Hi, I'm the president of Alamo Farmstead's Babcock Road Neighborhood Association and the planning chair of the Heidmer-Leon Creeks Community Plan. And I've actively participated in various plans with the city, including the North Sector Plan as well as the SA Tomorrow Plan. I want to talk about one, being a plan partner got to bypass with regards to the ETJ, 3 and 4 concessions. So regarding the plan partner, I always find it disingenuous when a developer comes to a planning discussion and discounts any of the various approved plan components of our city's comprehensive master plan. During Planning Commission meeting, Lennar discounted the relevance of the 2010 North Sector Plan simply because of its age. Our various city plans are adopted as components of the City Comprehensive Master Plan and remain relevant until they are updated or embodied within a newer plan. Until our community finishes the SA Tomorrow Plan, the North Sector Plan is the city's guiding star for any of this development in this community. These plans are not made in a vacuum and take months to years to develop, with input from the City Council and DSD teams working with developers, realtors, businesses, residents, and citizens. All these competing parties come together as partners and work with this plan to build them. I always hope that a developer wishing to join neighbors within a community does so as a partner, but this has not been the case with Lennar. They have zero outreach we have zero outreach from Lennar as we went through these processes. Bypass the city limits, a major development requires a lot of approvals and communication. Had this replat process occurred within the city, a DST, significant DST, would have showed lots of problems with regards to this request. Change in the North Sector plan says this to be country tier, watt per 10 acres. One lot bigger than 10 acres. Density is what they're proposing here, which is 11 lots per acre. So went from 1 for 10 and lots that are 35 by 140 versus acreage lots. Buffers within city limits. UDC requires density transitions that sub-median density residential and low densities. So in this map here, so can you bring up the second page here? So we see that the way that they outline the next page, you'll see that we have Antonio, and so not here in regards to this plan. Roadway review, the major collector abutting this property would have been deemed incorrect simply because of the size of the SA plan tomorrow seeks a major arterial roadway, and so this is not that. This is the major collector, so it's significantly undersized. All of these efforts within the city would have triggered a public planning commission meeting to review the change request, a public planning commission meeting to review the replat, a public zoning commission zoning change, and that happened here simply because of this ETJ. By simply choosing the ETJ property, which is only miles outside of city limits, Lennar has been able to bypass really a lot of what's been happening, and they're doing things by right, which is honest. So they are by right able to do this, but they're bypassing, and they're again going back to the partnership. So who needs a MUD? During the planning meeting, Lennar stated that they were going to develop this property with or without the MUD. So that should be in the story right there. So in a suburb near Dallas called Midlothian City, the city council determined that developers should not be driving the development on their city, and instead developers should comply. The city wants a recently passed resolution that opposes the formation by a developer of any and all special districts, including MUDs, cited that special district improperly used by certain developers to avoid compliance with city and county infrastructure plans, and that city and county governments should have the proper authority to regulate growth of their respective cities and counties. This means for MUDs proposed by developers in Midlothian, the city has already stated its rejection, requiring the TC local desires they want to move forward. And records show that TCU generally does not act against the locals' desires. And so City of San Antonio should consider a similar resolution and reject the MUD request, as TCQ will likely not act against these desires. Finally, what concessions do? Lacking no measure thresholds or operational requirements. So how do we manage anything that's not binding and specific with regards to MUD, especially after walk away and we don't have any control anymore? Once the MUD is established, we believe that little exists to bind the consent agreement. Components of our UDC do provide governance of the Edwards Aquifer contributing zone located within ETJ, and brings up this notion with regard to includes a report by Pape Dawson which says Helotes Creek into the groundwater. So I ask for you to reject this.
Randy Newman, followed by Susie Dickerson.
Susie Dickerson is donating her time to me, as is Tracy Smith.
Tracy Smith. Okay, 9 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Mayor, council members, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My comments focus on risk versus reward, the risk versus reward, approving or rejecting the proposed MUD for the Guajolote Ranch project. This is not a typical MUD request, and the usual instinct to approve in order to extract concessions does not serve the city's long-term interests here. But before I go further, I want to note that the Aquifer Alliance, approximately 80 nearby residents, the Scenic Loop Helotes Creek Alliance, the South Review in Travis County District Court yesterday, challenging the wastewater permit issued by the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality to Municipal Operations LLC, the contractor for Lennar Homes. This underscores the seriousness of the concerns surrounding this project. Guajolote Ranch sits on a highly sensitive recharge zone. The stakes here are not about road widths and contamination cannot be undone. We've heard claims that denial simply by nature. Technically possible. Those who understand these processes agree that approval after a city rejection is highly unlikely. A no does not create unregulated mud. It strengthens the position by signaling that aquifer production is limited. A mud board is a controlled developer and is not obligated to honor every concession that the city might negotiate. This includes the 9 concession saws extending water servicement. Once water is connected and an independent mud board takes over, the enforceability of those concessions become uncertain. If they cannot be enforced, they are not protected. A denial of this permit for particular saws cannot extend sewer service into the ETJ without your city council approval. That gives the city significant leverage. Contrary to what you vote does not, in fact, it increases it. It ensures that any future begin with aquifer protection and enforceable agreements as approving a MUD gives away the city's strongest leverage. Once the MUD exists, the developer controls the board. The ability to enforce concessions becomes, that is the real risk here, not the risk of saying no. A no vote shading power and ensures that development, if it occurs, happens responsibly and with enforceable protection. This decision is about how developers controls it, whether the city can promise. There are numerous reasons to be concerned about the developer's processes, from public safety issues to procedural problems to environmental regulated development atop the Balcones fault zone, especially high density development, discharging up to 1 million gallons per day of treated wastewater, but a MUD here does not provide it. Instead, it adds 6-figure costs to every home while placing the city's primary drinking water source at risk. We're left with a proposal that threatens public health, threatens affordability, and threatens the water supply of the nation's 7th largest city, all to benefit a developer whose interests are not aligned with the long-term health and safety of this community. 190 years ago, perhaps the most left an old building just a few blocks. A small group of citizens standing for a large ideal sent a message that still echoes in this city's memory. If you'll permit me, I'd like to take a bit of poetic license to recreate the spirit of that moment for us today. City Hall, San Antonio, Texas, January 22nd, 2026. To the people of San Antonio, a bill has been placed before you that would bring high-density development, 1 million gallons of wastewater discharge, and an unaccountable mud board to run the most fragile recharge zones. Developer has asked for approval without enforceable protections. They have offered concessions that may not bind a future mud board, and they seek to shift long-term risks to the public while keeping the benefits for themselves. We answer this request with a simple truth. San Antonio's water is not negotiable. Our aquifer is not replaceable. Our health is not for sale. Then I call upon the council in the name of public safety, in the name of
The time is now 10:45, and we have come back from recess. One, two, three. Okay. Let me thank those from the community that came in to speak today. We understand, obviously, one, not only has this been a long-standing issue, long-time discussion, and continuing, frankly, differing analysis on what this means threat-wise. Before we get started, though, I alluded to it earlier. We, of course, take very seriously not only your concerns, but those that have also been elevated by other elected officials that are in opposition to this project. So we did do our due diligence, and as I shared, we did reach out to SWERI, Southwest Research Institute, based on the analysis that you all referenced, to see if they had maybe a more up-to-date analysis in light of SAWS's analysis that offers a different conclusion. So let me ask Eric to summarize his response, the response that he received from SWERI.
Yep, thank you, Mayor. So yes, I spoke to Mr. Hamilton from Southwest Research and asked if they were going to provide any additional information given the SAWS information that had been shared with the public and the council. Mr. Hamilton said that they had not been engaged and would not engage further in this issue. He did point out that the original SWERI data and report was about the area in general, and that he did not anticipate that organization doing any additional work and had not been engaged to do any work.
Thank you, Eric. With that, I'll turn to my colleagues for their comments. Councilman McKee Rodriguez has stepped away. However, Councilwoman Kaur is going to read a statement on his behalf.
Councilmember McKee Rodriguez shares the concerns of the speakers and will not be supporting the mud request. The developer has stated that 3,000 homes will go forward with or without this mud. If true, that's unfortunate, but the city should not be an accomplice.
Councilwoman Aldrete Gavito.
Thank you. I wanted to first off thank all the speakers who are here today. This is an important initiative, and that y'all took the time to let us know what y'all are thinking about it and feeling about it is important. So I really appreciate your engagement. I definitely want to call out Philip Manna. He's a District 7 neighborhood president, and Randy, Judy, thank you for all y'all's help, Paul, and all the other speakers who are here. I want you to know that we hear you, I hear your concerns. Councilwoman Mesa Gonzalez and I have partnered to learn more. That's why we co-authored that CCR about this initiative. That's why I wrote the memo to SAWS and the Edwards Aquifer Authority to push, because right when we first started engaging with this project, we do hear a lot of competing information, misinformation, one way or the other. And so we Councilwoman Mesa Gonzalez and I were really focused on figuring out the truth, making sure that y'all's concerns were heard. And so I do want to thank you for y'all's help in understanding that. Really what I do want to focus on today is I want to clarify the process so that my council colleagues and I, as well as you all, are clear on the next steps. So I have a question for the city attorney. At the end of the 120-day period that we're in now, is failure to enter an agreement considered consent to the MUD process? So to the MUD process starting on slide 6. If on February 4th or 5th, if we deny or no action, then we are basically saying, let's start this process.
I want to make sure I understand your question. You're asking Councilwoman if the council denies the MUD and then they try to enter into an agreement with SAWS. If that agreement isn't entered, then there's no MUD. but then they proceed to TCEQ.
So what I really want to get clarification on is, right now we're at the 120-day period. Okay, so the 90-day period.
Yes. So right now, we are in the 90-day period. So that 90-day period started November 10th of last year. So when...
I'm sorry, yes, you're right. Yeah.
So by February 8th, council needs to make one of three decisions. Either you consent, you deny, or you take no action. Once a decision is made and the developer submits a petition, that petition will then kick off the 120 days.
Sorry, and thank you for that. But when on February 5th, if council votes to take either no action or deny it, then that kickstarts slide number 6.
No, a petition has to be submitted.
Okay, sorry. Then
Right.
a petition would be submitted to kickstart slide number 6.
Right, and then once a petition is submitted, to the city, the developer will then negotiate an agreement with SAWS. Depending upon the outcome of that discussion, either they will move towards TCQ if no agreement is reached, or if an agreement was reached where they can provide services, then development could occur.
And I want to emphasize, Councilman, attempt to negotiate with. There's no obligation
To
for
negotiate.
either party to reach an agreement.
So let me recap all of that. February 5th comes, council either votes yes, which is one thing, or council votes no or no action. And then in that case, the developer then submits a petition, which kicks off slide number 6 for that MUD process.
The 120.
The 120 days. That's right?
Yes, the 120 starts when another petition is submitted.
Got it. Okay, thank you. With that, also, I do want us to be clear on slide 9 and 10, when y'all are talking about wastewater service development controls. These are all great things that were negotiated. I guess the previous SAWS board or whatever had negotiated these. If on February 5th, City Council votes no to the MUD, items number 1 through 15 are thrown out the window.
Well, these would be part of the development agreement. So one, the settlement agreement, so that's actually part of, I guess, a lawsuit that was already settled, so there's that. But these would go away as part of that development agreement. So a development agreement would not be, that would be off the table.
Okay, so yes, so just to be clear, if we vote no, or we're not taking any action, the wastewater service development controls number 1 through 15 go away.
But it's a bit nuanced.
Let me try it, Councilwoman. There's protections that are in the agreement with SAWS, the USA with SAWS, that will stay in place. There's protections in the settlement that was reached with the developers related to the TCEQ permit that will stay in place.
Okay, do we know what those are?
Yes, we can. There are many of the ones listed here, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So the answer, they're not all going to go away.
So not all of them,
Correct.
but can we see which ones would stay and which ones would go away? I think that would be helpful.
Yes, so as part of the development, the settlement agreement itself lists out a number of the terms of the agreement, so there are about 12 to 13 actual development controls that were part of that particular settlement with municipal operations and the city. There are then 9 specific development controls that were agreed to when SAWS agreed to their water USA for sewer. And then as part of the development agreement, we included some additional ones.
Okay.
Like inspections and testing. And
I think it would be important for my colleagues and I to see and know that, you know, again, if we were to vote no to the MUD on February 5th, maybe items 1 through 15 would go away, but what are the 12 or 13 that would stay? I think that's important for us to note so we could see what that path forward would look like.
And it should be noted, too, that the development agreement, if council were to approve consent with a development agreement, it would be filed with the county, so it would run with the land. So no matter which property owner owns that particular property, it would be part of that deed.
Yeah, yeah. When can we, Andy, when can we get that? Which ones of these 15 would be?
We should be able to get that by the end of this week, by tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's going to be important because, you know, again, I think there was a lot of work with these wastewater service development controls, and I'd hate to see that all gone away. Yeah, so, you know, I think that council's going to have an important vote on February 5th, and again, I just want you all, the speakers that signed up or that are watching, to know that we hear you and we do hear your concerns. This comes up, you know, I was having a Donaldson Terrace Neighborhood Association meeting last night, and Donaldson Terrace is not too far from here. I mean, this issue is coming up at every single one of my neighborhood associations, so this is very real. We do, obviously, you know, as a society, we are getting much smarter about our water and forever chemicals and all that kind of stuff. So I just want you to know that your concerns are taken seriously. Thank you.
Councilwoman Castillo.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Bridget, for the presentation, as well as to members of the public for giving your comment. In one of Mayor Ron Nirenberg's closing speeches, he highlighted that one of the greatest roles that this governing body has is to protect our water source and protect the Edwards Aquifer. And I share those concerns that the public have established in terms of public health, contamination, and lack of governance with the mud. And on top of that, I think it's important to highlight MUDs, right, and the ways in which nearly half of the state special districts, nearly 50%, are MUDs. And as cited by the Texas Comptroller, MUDs have absorbed and siphoned in 2023 nearly $12.7 billion away from the state. And those are dollars that otherwise could be going into infrastructure, education, public safety, public health, and so much more. And as cited by James Sams in her public comment and the Houston Chronicle, what they found is that folks outside of city limits were sometimes paying nearly triple the amount of property taxes than folks within the inner city. And as folks also highlighted in their public comment, there's no oversight with these governing bodies. And it's just important for the fiscal responsible thing to do, just the overall responsible thing to do in terms of our environment, to ensure that we're asking the right questions and, of course, protecting our water source. And again, just highlighting, as mentioned in the public comment with Katy, Texas in particular, folks just, their taxes going higher and higher, and it's something that the governor has even highlighted as a potential loophole that we need to address at the state, because too many of folks establishing these MUDs are taking advantage of the folks that live within them. But as Michael Schick also stated, part of his public comment, right, this is also a conversation about public trust. And my position is that the options as laid out, neither option appears favorable, because denial means, right, that the developer can still potentially develop on the property, and that means potential contamination on the recharge zone, but also, you know, approval is still development on the recharge zone. So those are the concerns that I have. But we know, as folks already again emphasized comment after comment, that the development on the recharge zone is long-lasting and often irreversible. And folks touched on what goes into our water source. And we know that water doesn't know city limits, doesn't know county lines. And that's a shared responsibility that this body has to ensure that we're making the right decision to take care of our water source and to be good neighbors with folks know not just the impacts of the water, but within their communities. I think the examples that many of you all laid out in terms of access to this proposed community and the congestion that it may provide, it's not just about more cars on the road, which I think is a larger conversation that we are having, right? But the risk that of putting folks in danger, whether it's a flood, a fire, that's such high density without the appropriate infrastructure to facilitate folks going in and out of that cul-de-sac or that potential development. Again, I want to thank my council colleagues, Councilwoman Aldarte Davito, Mesa Gonzalez, for initiating this conversation with their council consideration request, but as well as my council member colleague, Councilman Munguia, for his leadership within the Planning Commission, because this is one of our greatest responsibilities, as highlighted by the former mayor. And this is something that I'm hopeful that my colleagues and I will be on the same page in terms of ensuring that we continue to protect the recharge zone. Thank you, Mayor.
Donovan, I see you here from SAWS in case it informs any of my colleagues' additional comments. If you'd like to speak to, in this forum, right, the risks associated as you see them and why SAWS believes those to be mitigated.
Yes, Mayor and City Council members. I'm Donovan Burton here on behalf of the San Antonio Water System. We're here just as a resource witness. We take no position on the mud district. I realize these are complicated discussions far beyond just the water issue. We have done an analysis. We have looked at some of the water issues, and we believe we've, through all of the conditions that you pointed out and some of the geology there, we believe a lot of the significant concerns have been mitigated. The significant water quality concerns have been mitigated as it relates to the SAWS water source in terms of the Edwards Aquifer. Obviously, this is, again, the subsurface is extremely complicated. These aquifers are fractured and have barriers and that sort of thing in them, so it's a very complicated analysis. We think the water does go into some of the upper Trinity Aquifer. We have wells in the lower Trinity, probably 8 miles away. Actually, they're not our wells. We purchase it from somebody else. And then as it goes in through what's called the Haby Fault, we believe a lot of that water is it moves within the Trinity Aquifer, and then it goes through or has a hard time getting through a dense layer of the Edwards Aquifer to get into the area of the Edwards Aquifer that's pulled for drinking water. So we believe a lot of those risks have been mitigated through these conditions that we've put into the agreement. Again, you have to look at it as what is the source of the water going in, and have those conditions been mitigated? What is the geology, and then where is it coming out of? So we do believe that a lot of the water quality risks have been mitigated for the SAWS water system.
And while you're there, some of the concern, as you heard, is regarding the ability to monitor, right? If there is some non-compliance with either of the restrictions, or if there is, if somebody's geological assessment is in fact different, which is different than your own, it turns out to be correct. So can you help the body understand the measures that you anticipate putting in place? Are any of those being tried for the first time? Have we seen those work effectively in other places? To the concerns raised earlier about these similar projects not too far from here that are non-compliant, right? So speak to, please, how the measures that you anticipate that SAWS recommends putting in place have been tried previously, are working effectively, or if in fact some of these may be done for the first time, and which there might not be a reference point for us.
Sure. So a lot of issues there, but a lot of them, again, within the 9 conditions that SAWS put into the agreement, it's about the development of the property, so impervious cover limits, making sure that the stormwater flow is not into the sensitive recharge features that are either on site or close by. So that's the first layer, is making sure that it doesn't get into the aquifer. Then we have monitoring all over Bexar County. We utilize the USGS as well in several areas of the streams. And so we have a lot of those generally in the area. We may, if this ultimately comes to fruition, we may change some of the locations to ensure that there's a little additional enhanced monitoring in this particular area. But at SAWS, we take thousands and thousands of samples of our system every month, every year certainly, where we analyze the water quality and are constantly looking at the water quality that comes out, ultimately delivered to our customers. There are lots of regulations in place from the federal and state level to ensure that whatever we provide, regardless of the source water, whatever we provide to our customers meets all regulatory expectations. I don't know if that answered your question.
It does, thank you. To clarify one piece of it, though, none of the measures that you put in place, you're putting in for the first time, right? These are things that, processes that you use currently or previously that you have found to be effective?
Yeah. The other thing I would say that's being put in for the first time is really the level of treatment that the developer has agreed to, that we've worked with them to enhance the nutrient removal, phosphorus, nitrate, those sorts of things, to enhance the nutrient removal within the wastewater process. That's a process that's pretty stringent, and is not being implemented in a lot of other areas with these packaged treatment plants that are in lots of different areas throughout the state. So I think that in and of itself is a huge improvement for as compared to other developments of this nature.
Thank you. Councilwoman Mesa Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. And thank you to everybody that's been here today. I appreciate your comments and the conversations we've had before this. So I do think it's important to note that state legislation that stripped municipalities of meaningful local control, including the authority to annex land in our own backyard, meaningful local control could have either prevented this project altogether or at a minimum provided us better options to protect our community. But here we are now, and I appreciate the development controls that the city mentioned in slides 9 and 10, but I will not be supportive of this item on February 5th, and I ask my colleagues to do the same. I have a couple of questions just to clarify. If the developer did submit a PID request, excuse me?
The developer submitted a PID application to the county.
Okay, and that can, I guess the county can review that within those 120 days, I'm assuming?
No,
okay.
PIDs and bunds have different statutes that apply.
Okay.
So they did submit a PID application to the county March 28th of 2023. The county took no action on that PID application. So typically, with PID applications that the city will look at, when we get to city council, you'll notice that we'll typically have a Bexar County resolution with a consent to, an intent to create. Because the county took no action on that particular PID application, it's just out there. So the county has taken no action on the PID application they received for this particular project.
And they still have so it's been sitting at the county for 2 years?
That would be a question for the
county. But they still have the
county.
Opportunity to bring it up?
That would be a question for the county. We're in the process of a MUD application.
Andy?
The answer to your question is yes, they still can bring it up.
They still have the opportunity, okay. And I guess if they do choose to approve a PID, what benefit does that give the city? Does that give the city any sort of benefit?
In terms of?
Or a seat at the table, does that offer us any sort of?
So to answer your question, Councilwoman, even if the county approves the PID, again, conceptually,
Sure.
if they approve, they would still have to come back to the city.
Same process.
Okay, same process, okay. And have we ever approved a MUD at the city?
No.
Okay. And?
Well, we don't approve MUDs. We get a request to consent to the creation of a MUD.
Have we ever?
That request has not come before us.
Okay. And on the, where was it? The agreement that the developer would have to have with SAWS if we deny this MUD, does them not being in the CCN affect any of that, or how does that, I'm sorry, does that change, or?
That may be a SAWS question.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council members. My name is Keith Martin. I'm Senior Corporate Counsel with the San Antonio Water System. In their attempt to negotiate an agreement for sewer services with SAWS, those services will not be in SAWS sewer CCN.
Right.
So SAWS is not required to provide sewer services in the area, and the developer doesn't And SAWS, conversely, SAWS does not have the right to provide those services in the area. But they will have, the second step of this process, the 120 days, when the negotiation process, SAWS will participate in that process with the developer and the city if necessary, to attempt to see if there are other thoughts or ideas that could be pursued that haven't already been considered as part of the original USA request.
Would that require them having to be in the CCN then? Or?
No. SAWS, as a municipal utility owned by a home rule city, the city of San Antonio, we have the authority to serve outside of our CCN and anywhere there's not a CCN.
Got it. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That's all my questions. I also think this is an opportunity to reevaluate our Edwards Aquifer Protection Program and better understand the current metrics in place for identifying and conserving property. I understand the value in conserving property west of Bexar County, but I do believe we are able to achieve more priorities for the public by conserving properties within Bexar County that are more likely to be developed within the very near future. So I know that we are going to have that conversation in the Community Health Committee, and I look forward to exploring that with my colleagues. Thank you so much. That's all my questions.
Councilwoman Spears.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all very much for coming today. I know this has been going on for a long time. I actually was around when the PID was first filed in 2023 over at the county, so I'm pretty familiar with this project. I've been out to Guajolote Ranch area, did the long tour with the neighbors and seen the headwaters, and I care very much about the water because I also represent a district that's over the recharge zone, and many karst features exist in my district, and so I'm fully aware of how important water is for our state, our city, our whole region. It's the true gold of the state, so we really need to be paying attention to the water. But I do have some questions about the creation of the MUD specifically. And a lot of them are for clarity, and some of them, well, I'll just ask them. I just want to clarify that a MUD is a separate taxing authority that levies its own ad valorem property tax on top of city, county, and school district taxes, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Is there any statutory requirement that a MUD automatically dissolve once its initial infrastructure is paid for?
No.
No, Councilwoman, there's no.
So is it true that even after the original bonds are retired, that a MUD can continue to exist and levy taxes?
That is correct.
All right. Is it correct that a MUD can issue additional bonds in the future beyond the initial bond authorization?
That is correct as well, they can.
And so who decides whether new bonds are issued? Is it the City Council or a MUD board?
The MUD board, Councilwoman.
So in the early years of a MUD, who controls the board? Is it a residents or a developer?
It'd be the developer because the MUD would just be created, having just been created.
Do we have any idea how long it would take for residents to have full control of the MUD board? Or if we have any reference points there?
Just based on the petition that was submitted for this particular application, they're looking to have the ad valorem taxes and that all paid off within 30 years, and all the 3,000 homes developed within like 12 years.
So potentially as long as 12 years?
Yes, as long as 12 years, according to the petition that was submitted.
Okay. I think that's important to note, that the people that live in the MUD wouldn't have control of the board until potentially 12 years from its creation.
And
correct?
I believe according to state law, it's 5 board members.
And 5 board members. Has the developer asked about future annexation by the city at this point?
That would be a part of the proposed development agreement.
Mm-hmm. So it is in there?
Yes,
they
it's
do
in the
want to be
drafted
annexed?
it's in the drafted development agreement, and that would be in all our development agreements. This one is a little unique, so we do have information there based that would include debt and financial obligations.
What do you mean?
So the difference between a PID and a MUD is that with a PID, if City Council chooses to annex a PID at a future date, we don't take on the debt of the PID. With a MUD, if City Council chooses to annex the MUD, we could take on the debt of the PID. However, you'll notice that in the presentation, I mentioned that some of the proposed terms include a cap on the district's bond issuance. So in the development agreement, we do note that if the developer wishes to increase that $150 million, that would have to come back to council. But then also, we have information on when the last bonds can be issued. But if City Council were to annex at a future date, we have the ability per state law to then charge the residents in the district a post-annexation surcharge. And that's according to the Texas Water Code.
The residents that don't live anywhere right now, but that would potentially live there.
Yes.
We could assess that
Per
after the fact.
per the Texas Water Code.
Has the developer asked for any other infrastructure or talked about other infrastructure plans and needs in the MUD at this point?
No, we're just basing off of the petition that was submitted and what they propose to develop.
Okay, thank you. I do also want to point out that Bexar County did pass the resolution supporting the motion for rehearing for the TCEQ on December 16th of this past year. I really do believe in private property rights, but I do have a lot of concerns about a MUD. It creates a separate government with its own permanent tax rate. And that tax layer sits on top of city, county, and school district taxes and lasts indefinitely. A MUD can also issue new bonds and extends that tax burden for decades. Future homeowners deserve certainty. They deserve to know what they're paying for and how long they'll pay and when it ends. Under a MUD, decisions are shifted from elected officials to a separate board, often developer-controlled in the early years. If this area is annexed in the future, a MUD would require the city to assume its outstanding debt. We have a responsibility to protect future taxpayers from inheriting decades of obligations. And so for these reasons, I cannot in good conscience support the creation of this MUD. Thank you.
Councilwoman Villagrán.
Thank you. Thank you all for coming. I was very impressed with the presentation of the speakers. Y'all did a really good job. I didn't feel like y'all were saying the same facts over and over again. So I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the members that did reach out to my team and spoke with them. I think what we have here is local control versus private property rights, how we move forward. And ultimately, I think the theme is how are we good neighbors? And how do we manage all this? And it is difficult because this would be easier if you were your own municipality, like Windcrest or Live Oak or things like that. But you come to San Antonio and you ask us to look at things, and we're trying to manage as best we can. So I do want you to expand on the take no action piece. If we take no action, does that indicate, and I don't know who can talk on it, Andy, or if we take no action, does that indicate support for or against on this issue?
If we take no action, Council, then it's somewhat like a denial because it's not approving the consent.
So, and the reason, as we look at water and we look at water issues, I think the group that has come and spoke made a compelling argument. Thank you, it's Susan. Made a compelling argument that this neighbor in particular, in terms of talking about being a good neighbor, that this neighbor in particular has not done what you've requested and has not been as transparent as possible in this process. So that is the one thing, is taking them at face value and what they say regarding the wastewater and what they're going to do is problematic because they haven't basically gone out to the community like we would like them to go out to the community. But I don't want to shut the door in terms of MUDs in the future, is that if somebody comes to me, and maybe not over I'm leaning against anywhere where the Edwards Aquifer is, but if they come to a different part in the ETJ and they say, we will bring you a state-of-the-art waste water facility, I'm kind of like, I want to see that, because I do believe, and I know they're doing it in other parts of the state and the world, where it goes from toilet to tap. So I don't want to close that door, but I don't think this project in particular has been as forthcoming as possible. And then some of the quotes that y'all provided about what their executive said at meetings, that was problematic. I'm familiar with Lennar and the development in my area. So it's just one of those things that I kind of want to hear more kind of information regarding that, take no action, because I don't want to shut the door completely to the city of San Antonio and the ETJ, because we have it around the entire city in terms of if we do in the future need to input on a MUD, that our expectations are a wastewater facility that is state-of-the-art. So I know SAWS is here, and that's what I'd like to see, because, you know, saying you're state-of-the-art and the city having and SAWS having expectations of what that looks like in terms of wastewater facility is very different. So I want to thank y'all for coming in, for giving us that information, for your willingness to be a good neighbor to the city of San Antonio, and I look forward to all the work that planning did, their recommendations, and that of Councilman Mesa Gonzalez. Thank you.
Andy, to clarify a point, if we decide to take no action on this, that has no bearing on our future review of MUD applications, correct?
No, Mayor, they're each individual considerations.
Correct, yeah, okay, thank you. Councilman White.
Thanks, Mayor. I want to begin by thanking my colleagues, Mesa Gonzalez, Aldrete Gavito, Councilwoman Spears, too, who's been at the forefront of this, and Edward, the councilman, as well. You know, there was a lot of work done, I think, leading up to today's meeting. I think most of us got a chance to go out and visit the site, but then even after that. So y'all's work was really important in getting us here today. I'm going to be brief, because all of my colleagues have really nailed this one. I'm a private property rights guy too. I mean, we live in Texas. Land is king, and for the most part, you should get to be able to do with your own property what you want. However, the exception to that is when something you want to do with your own property may really have a negative impact on others. And I think in this particular case, the research really is sort of mixed here, and there is a lot of research and science that says that our Edwards Aquifer, you know, we may contaminate our water source if this project was to move forward. This is a water source that's, you know, serves more than 2.5 million people in our region, including, of course, here in San Antonio. It's a unique recharge system where rainwater filters directly into the aquifer, and so contamination in one area can certainly affect the entire water supply. This has been an issue that I know is sensitive to a lot of folks. It's not just the landowners in the area, but again, it's everybody that's serviced by our water system. So I stand with my colleagues on this. I will not be supporting the MUD. Thanks, Mayor.
Councilman Galvan.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to all the speakers that came in today to voice their concerns and their thoughts on this particular project. And I also want to say thank you to everybody involved who helped make the tour possible. For Councilor Munguia and I, we went out there last year to kind of look at what things are going on the ground level. Those kind of tours and kind of on the ground work really helps us make sure that we're aware of what's going on in the community, especially in places that are a little bit more distant than from where we're at. Grade 4 is not too far from District 6. Technically, Government Canyon is within District 6, so we're not too far away. So this has been a very important topic in a lot of my neighborhoods, whether it's in Northwest Crossing or in the Great Northwest or many other places that kind of get closer and closer to that part of town. Given that, I'm really grateful that also Ken Pfeiffer from the Northwest Crossing neighborhood in District 6 was able to join us during that conversation, as he's been a really vocal advocate as well, not only within District 6, but also within our joint areas in District 7 with the Northwest Neighborhood Alliance. And so I just want to put those pieces out there just because I think it's really helpful to keep our folks engaged and to note that they've been engaged on this topic for quite a while. I won't be too long. I think Councilmember Castillo, Councilmember Spears, they focused in on the mud kind of components really well. Of course, we've all been talking a lot about the water concerns as well. I'll just leave this final point about, our city's been trying to move away from suburban sprawl and enabling that at all corners of our city for quite a while, ultimately to avoid higher construction or infrastructure costs, reduce environmental impacts, and to strengthen our neighborhoods that are already here in our city limits. So this development would not only contradict those efforts, it would also significantly impact the growth patterns and natural landscape near and around my district specifically, but in general to the work that we're doing here. So the state wants to do local planning for us. I think they can answer to the people. I don't think it's required of the city to try to engage in that. We do our best to know and to work with the folks that are here on the ground, and the state doesn't know how to do that. That's up to them to figure it out. Thank you.
Councilman Munguia.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, thank you to everybody who was out here today. I got to hear many of you last week at the Planning Commission, and I know y'all have to leave your homes very early to come here downtown, and it takes a lot of effort to be as organized as you all. And my kudos to y'all. I mean, this is such a well-organized group of folks advocating, so you deserve a lot of credit for that. And I do credit, Judy for inviting me to the tour. I was very happy to be out there. I don't think I'd ever been to Great Forest before, to be honest with you. It was very beautiful. You have a very beautiful community. And so I got to meet, a bunch of you there, Peter, Steve, of course, Judy, Randy, Lynette, Mayor was there also. And I got to do the tour with Councilman Phillips, actually, and that was really informative. And so I appreciate all that time and effort. And I want to thank my colleagues who did the CCR, because I learned that until that CCR, a lot of the residents here didn't know if this was on the city's radar or how we felt about it. And so they were really appreciative of y'all's CCR, letting them know that we are concerned about it here at the city of San Antonio. And so, safe drinking water is just, we take that for granted here in San Antonio, being able to put a glass under the tap and drink it. I went to college in New Orleans, and I had never heard of a water boil advisory before, and it was just shocking to me that people had to boil water to consume it in New Orleans, and that is a frequent issue there. And I just hope that never, ever happens to the citizens of Bexar County, because we are so fortunate to have our aquifer. Something I said last week was regarding the treatment facility, and I think some of what we have to do here a lot of times is not only think about the start of the development or the first month, but 20, 30 years from now, what decisions that we make are going to have effect down that line. And I just simply don't know that facility would be up to par in that time frame. Essentially, it would be the HOA responsible for that wastewater treatment facility. And I've worked with a lot of HOAs. There's great people, but they can barely keep alive the monument and the landscaping around their monuments, much less have to deal with a huge facility. And, I'm glad Mr. Lee brought up the other wastewater facilities in the county that have been ticketed and fined by TCEQ. And I said that last week, right? I don't believe TCEQ is capable of having teeth to their fines. Great example on the far south side. Not that long ago, we had a property full of tires, just water contamination with those tires, mosquitoes. It was a huge quality of life issue. TCQ was involved. They were giving fines, but it took, honestly, years to get those tires out of there. And what happens if this facility starts to fail? And what happens if there's another winter freeze, right? And something happens to that facility? The ability to get that quickly is going to be very difficult. And so, I know the argument that it's okay to put water out there, that it's not going to go to aquifer, won't be contaminated, that there's plenty of filtration, natural devices out there with the soil. We know that landscape changes over time. We are in severe droughts. We've had a severe freeze, and so we know those things will change over time. So we have to be very cognizant of that. And I just love all the questions that Councilwoman Spears brought up. Those are very well-pointed questions about the actual process of the mud, and people not realizing what they're going to get into when they buy a home out there. I mean, it could be on paper, but there's time and time again we've heard of residents not knowing what they were getting into when they purchased their home. So I really appreciate that. I, of course, will be voting no on this. We don't need to help this along. And I really hope that SAWS can work, should this be denied, in an agreement, listening to all of you and your concerns on that. So, and I'm glad you bought the rock. I happen to have my own piece of the aquifer rock here too. It's a lot smaller than yours, right? But it reminds me, you know, of a lot of things we have to do up here and what we have to fight for, and the quality of water that so many of us depend on. So thank you all again for your time, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you.
John, I have a question for you. The last bullet on the summary slide is really the takeaway, right? Which is approval of the consent to the creation of the MUD with an executed development agreement are the only option that allows for city conditions. Can you speak to, at this point, to the extent you're able to, right? I understand there are ongoing negotiations, but it'd be helpful for us to get a sense of how the discussions are going around some of the proposed terms. And I say all that as you've heard, some of the council members reference the other Lennar projects in our community, right? So there are other opportunities that we will have to partner. And so recognizing any appetite for support for some of the conditions that we've asked for, you know, even absent our consent, is something that we'd be very interested in understanding. So whatever you'd like to share at this point, but then as well as we approach the vote on the 5th.
Sure, Mayor. I think we've outlined what we have shared with the developer. We have had some initial discussions about those items.
I was just going to say, if you'd bring up that slide 8, please.
Sorry.
Yep, thanks.
I think it's 8 and 9. Yep, okay, yep. And then, that's correct. So we've shared these with the developer. We've had some initial discussions. There's been productive conversations. At this point, there's not a signed draft agreement for the council to consider. That's our intent for the next time we come before you at a session. But there has been no large pushback on these at this point. There's been good, productive conversation is what I would say. Obviously, there's not a signed document, so we can't say we have agreement to all of these at this point, but we're working towards it.
And to the extent other communities have had experiences with MUDs of varying levels of positivity, can you speak to, or maybe this is also for the legal team, the situation where we may find ourselves in, right, where we do not consent to this, right, and then it moves forward, and then what leverage has had other communities have in asking for some of those conditions? Can you help us lay that out? I understand each of these situations are different, but I think it's important to recognize when, you know, once it's moved past us, there's some, you know, discussion or decision made at TCQ, what then has been the success of municipalities or entities in securing some of those conditions that they originally asked for.
Yeah, go ahead.
We'll take a look at that, but my initial reaction, Mayor, is that once it gets out of the realm of the city and in TCQ, then really no municipality would have very much leverage at that point.
No, that's also my instinct. I wanted to understand if you had some other case studies that would help us, again, given MUDs are much more prevalent in other parts of the state. Okay. Okay, thank you. This is, as you all well know, not a new topic. This is one that SAWS has reviewed the previous mayor obviously worked on this while he was on the SAWS board, reviewed that analysis as well, and we find ourselves here many, many years later. Obviously, as mentioned here, we're trying to balance a couple of things, right? Which is not only do we have, unfortunately, competing, excuse me. Oh, you didn't let me know. Okay, well, all right. Let me finish here. We're balancing a couple of competing things here, right? The need, obviously, to be a good neighbor with understanding when we are going to have leverage and where we may not. We've had some discussions with the developer in terms of how this project may be different than some of the others, but of course we take with a grain of salt many of the points that you all raised here, which is frankly the experience in other parts of the state that demonstrate a challenging outcome, let's just say. Before I go further, let me let my colleague, Councilwoman Kaur, provide some comments.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you all so much for coming, those of you that spoke. I actually learned a lot more about this area and this issue because of some of the comments that are made, i.e. Eric and I were talking a little bit earlier about even the small, narrow parts of the street and the drainage issues that must also occur. Yesterday during B session, we were talking a lot about the drainage challenges that we have throughout the city as a whole and how we already don't have enough funding to address some of those layering issues that come, like Councilmember Galvan mentioned, because of suburban sprawl. And so we want to make sure that we're being very judicious as we move forward on what we're incentivizing and what we're not incentivizing. I understand we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I think most of you all know that. We wish that we could say, hey, if we next week or 2 weeks from now vote, do not approve or do not take action on this, that this would be dead and the development would be dead. Unfortunately, I think all of you all know that that's not the case. There will probably still be a movement forward. And just so that we're all on the same page, could you just help us explain, after the SAWS negotiation piece, assuming that SAWS says they're not negotiating, what happens at the TCEQ spot on that chart that Councilwoman Alderete Gavito was mentioning?
On slide 6, what would happen if?
So say that, assuming SAWS does not get into agreement, because if SAWS were to get into an agreement, they would have to actually build the utilities all the way out there, right?
So if SAWS were to get to reach an agreement with the developer, there are specific requirements that are also built into state law regarding the infrastructure and the time that SAWS would need to provide that infrastructure. So that's something that SAWS would be discussing with the developer. But
solely based on actually building out their utility to service this area.
That's in terms of that particular development, so that's the agreement.
Right.
If no agreement is reached within the 120 days, then the developer would go to TCEQ for consideration of the MUD.
And then TCEQ could or could not approve the MUD?
They could consider creation of the MUD.
They could consider creation. So while I understand that this means if we don't take action on this in a couple weeks, we might lose a little bit of our authority for the seat at the table. At the same time, there's a little slimmer of hope that maybe TCEQ decides that they don't want to be a party of this. And I know the mayor's looking at me, she's like, that's probably not going to happen. But at the same time, there's that little hope. And so if we don't truly believe in what this is doing to our community, the potential threat, and I read through, y'all know I'm like a reader, we read through all of the articles, read through the SAWS briefing, read through what the Edwards Aquifer said, and it's tricky. And to what Councilmember Munguia was saying, right, is environment is changing over time. In the 70s, we didn't really know global warming was going to be a thing, and there weren't actions that were being taken into place to make sure we're not in the situation that we are today. So while it may not be affecting the water as demonstrated by what the faults and the SAWS said currently, but we don't know what could happen in the future in 30 years. And so that being said, I don't see the benefit in the situation of the few protections that we would be gaining to have a seat at this table outweigh our decision to actually pass on this and let TCEQ make the final decision. The last thing I just want to ask about those protections, that Councilman was asking about this too. In the letter that we got from SAWS, there was a list of 9 items that were already negotiated versus the ones that we are shown in the slides, there's 15. So do those 9 items that include 50% of the project is open space, 30% impervious cover, and A rating, those will still say no matter what, correct?
So the 9 that SAWS approved, including the 50% and the 30% impervious cover, and then there are actually 10 that were the settlement. Basically, I just did a compilation for those slides for the development controls. So there is some overlap. For example, the Class A operator. So the settlement will stay, and then the water connection, those will also stay as well. But I did mention in terms of the development agreement that would run with the land. So that would be a part of the deed that
Okay,
goes
that
forward.
wasn't a clear answer to me. So the 9 agreements in the SAWS,
Yes.
those are going to stay no matter what, if we
Yes.
do the MUD or not. Okay, so that's what I was trying to clarify. So
Yes.
the 9 agreements that SAWS has already come up to already includes having an A operator, already includes impervious cover. So those are guarantees no matter what in
Yes.
terms of what other action that we take in a couple weeks or not.
Those two, yes, 2 of the 9.
Yeah, those are 2 of the ones. I just named 2 examples. So that being said, I feel like those are some of the most important ones, right? We want to make sure there's a good operator. We want to make sure impervious cover is being limited. And so I understand we're giving up our land use rights as if we don't participate in the MUD. But I do think that right now we should just hope that we can go, you all can go advocate and lobby TCEQ and make sure that the mayor really doesn't think this is going to happen. But I really believe that if you guys go call every single state person that you know and try to get them to see the potential for negative impact on our water, that maybe there'll be a chance. Thanks, Mayor.
Either for Andy or for Bridget, can you, just for historical context, because again, on this HOPE strategy, can you help us understand if there are similar applications that TCEQ has reviewed, similar to this one, and how those fared?
I'm not aware of, I don't have an answer for that, Mayor.
Okay.
We can take a quick look
Yeah.
and then provide council something, Mayor.
It'd be helpful for us to understand how much hope we should put in that approach. And then, as a result of that, what conditions we're actually able to put in place. Okay. Thank you again. There's a couple of due-outs, both for the legal team and for the staff, that can help us provide some additional context so we understand fully, before we go into the vote on the 5th of February. Thank you again to everybody that took the time to be here, and appreciate the participation. Thank you. The time is now 11:41. This meeting is adjourned.